Tattooing dates at least as far back as the Bronze Age. A 5,000-year-old body found in a European glacier had several tattoos on his skin. Archaeologists have even uncovered what they believe are Stone Age tattooing instruments, sharp bone needles and clay discs containing mineral pigments. Walk into a tattoo parlor and the vast selection of elaborate designs will astound you. Once you make your choice, the tattoo artist traces the image. Next, he places the traced image on carbon paper and retraces the lines. This creates a carbon outline of the tattoo on the reverse side. The artist will use this blueprint, as it's called, as his guide. He cleans the customer's skin, then firmly presses on the blueprint. The carbon image transfers easily because the skin is damp. Now it's time to construct the needles. Most tattoos require 2 needles, one to make the outline of the image, the other to shade and color it in. Each needle is made up of as many as 20 smaller needles. The artist aligns these small needles in a jig, then solders them together onto one end of a steel rod. There's an eye on the other end. The number of small needles in a needle depends on the tattoo design, how thick its lines are, how big its colored areas are. The finished needles go into an autoclave to be sterilized. That takes 20 minutes at precisely 170 degrees Celsius. The tattoo artist uses that time to assemble the tattoo gun. After cleaning the frame with rubbing alcohol, he installs the motor called the coil. When an electric current runs through the coil, it oscillates the needle at up to 50 times per second. Once the 2 needles are sterilized, he takes the one for outlining, called the liner, and slides it into the tattoo gun. He hooks the eye on the other end onto the spring. As the spring moves back and forth, it moves the needle up and down. The tattoo artist stops and starts it with a foot pedal, like a sewing machine. Time to tattoo. He turns on the power supply to 10 volts and dabs the needle in the ink cap. The gun sucks up the ink. Some petroleum jelly on the skin helps the needle glide more easily. He begins by tracing the lines of the blueprint. The needle punctures the skin at a rate of up to 3,000 times per minute, injecting microparticles of ink which intermingle with the cells of the dermis, the skin's second layer. The artist continually wipes away the excess ink to keep his work area clean. After finishing the outline, he reapplies petroleum jelly. This seals the pores of the skin and prevents bleeding. Then he changes to the other needle and begins shading and coloring the image with a back and forth movement. He applies one color at a time, overlapping them to ensure thorough and even coverage. The needle can penetrate from 1 to 4 millimeters, and a good tattoo artist knows just how deep to go to create the different parts of the image. For example, he has to inject the outline the deepest, but going too deep can tear the skin and cause excessive pain and bleeding. But not going deep enough misses the dermis and leaves marks after healing. The cells of the dermis are remarkably stable, so tattoos last a lifetime. This tattoo has taken approximately 45 minutes to do from start to finish. The area will dry and scab over. Then, the scab will fall off, and this body art will be ready for exhibition. We take well-lit streets for granted, but there was a time when venturing out at night meant traveling in complete darkness. In 1814, the first gas lights lit up the streets of London, England. The first electric streetlights illuminated a public square in Cleveland, in the United States, in 1879. These streetlight poles are made of what's called composite, a combination of fiberglass and epoxy resin. Epoxy resin is a gooey liquid plastic mixed with a hardener. The factory constructs each pole on a mandrel, a long tapered metal cylinder. Workers first lubricate the surface. Then they take what's called fiberglass filament, a string composed of 2,200 tiny fiberglass strands. They'll wind dozens of filaments around the mandrel to create the pole. But first, the filaments go through a bath of epoxy resin. This resin is moldable, and once it's heat-cured, maintains its shape. Once the filaments come out of the bath, a machine called a filament winder wraps them around the rotating mandrel. The speed of rotation in relation to the speed of the winder is critical because it dictates the angle of the fibers. The lower the angle, the more that part of the pole will be able to withstand the wind and provide constant, stable lighting. When a pole bends in the wind, the light appears to flicker. The number of filament layers depends on the design of each specific pole, and that's determined by a couple of factors. First, the type of light fixture the pole will hold. The bigger the fixture, the stiffer the pole has to be. The other factor is wind. The windier the location, the stronger the pole has to be. Once the winding's done, the mandrel moves on to the curing station. They pump pressurized steam into the hollow inside of the mandrel. The heat kickstarts the hardener in the epoxy resin. This solidifies the resin and cures it. The mandrel rotates so that the pole cures evenly. Curing time depends on the length of the pole and how many filaments it's made of. To help extract the pole, they pump cold water through the mandrel. This makes the steel mandrel contract, loosening the pole. Remember how workers lubricated the surface of the mandrel before winding the filaments? Because of that, the pole just slides off. The pole now moves on to the finishing stages. First, an automated sander works the surface. The customer can order from a choice of surface textures, from smooth to rough. Sanding takes just a few minutes. Now a saw makes a neat cut at the top of the pole where the metal tenon will go. A tenon is the component that'll hold the light fixture to the pole. This particular model has an arched mounting arm. The composite has cooled a bit since curing, so they reheat it to make it flexible. After a bending machine makes the curve, they spray cold water inside to cool the material. This registers the curve in the resin's memory, setting the bent shape. Now they cut out the hand hole, the opening through which the electrician will connect the underground wire to the fixture wiring. Workers then spray the pole with urethane paint. The paint acts like sunscreen, protecting the composite from damaging ultraviolet rays. This grommet hole will connect to the underground pipe that contains the electrical wires. After installing a cover over the hand hole, it's time to assemble the parts. The underground pipe to the pole, and the pole to the tenon and light fixture.